Smooth and Silky presents Pestilence-a-Go-Go. Chapter 1.
"Yeah, that's right. Sit there and bleed, you pussy,"
Jimbo sneered, flexing his muscles for effect. He stood over his opponent in all his crew-cut glory, kissing his own bicep where his favorite stripper was tattooed across the rippling muscle. The young man groaned as he tried to pick himself up, but Jimbo slapped his fist down in a cheap shot to knock him right back down to the ground.
"Oh yeah, ain't nobody can beat me in this pissant town,"
Jimbo hooted and hollered, shooting his fist triumphantly up into the air.
"I'll give it a go,"
a man said, and Jimbo turned to stare down a well-built guy that looked to be in his early 40s.
"What?"
He raised an eyebrow in amusement.
"You want to take me on, old man? Hey guys, get a load of this."
Ted and Frank, two of his fellow farm boys, approached the ring from the bench press on the far side of the room.
"Oh now, look out there, Jimbo. That's not your ordinary old fuck,"
Ted warned when he laid his eyes on the newcomer.
"Yeah, Jimmy, this here used to be the pride and joy of this shitburg,"
Frank added, shaking his head.
"Right after those planes hit the towers, he ran off and joined the military. Went off to fight the good fight as a Marine. Delta Force, actually."
The man put up a hand.
"Oh well, excuse me, Mr. Delta Force."
Frank rolled his eyes.
"So, you some sort of fancy-pants war hero?"
Jimbo pursed his lips.
"More like a fucking disgrace,"
Ted scoffed.
"Word is he abandoned his squad out in Afghanistan." "What? You some sort of coward or something?"
Jimbo cracked his knuckles and stared menacingly at the old man he was now looking forward to crushing.
"Little more complicated than that,"
came the mellow reply.
"I doubt that."
The ripped farm boy in the ring squared his shoulders.
"Regardless, though, I'm gonna whoop your ass."
The old man stepped into the ring and slid on his gloves, waving forward his opponent who was half his age.
"You're gonna keep running your mouth, or are you gonna fight?"
he asked, and Jimbo narrowed his eyes.
"Oh, it's on,"
he said, and rushed forward. He attempted to land several punches, but the old man bobbed and weaved out of the way, dodging each hit with ease. He didn't bother trying to hit back, just letting his opponent swat at the air.
"Come on, Jimbo,"
Ted barked.
"You got this, fucker."
Frank added a hoot to pump up his friend, and the man in question was starting to get frustrated.
"You gonna fight or dance, you fucking coward?"
he grunted, and the old man winked at him. He was taken aback by the gesture. Such a sly little thing to happen in the middle of a fight, but he didn't want to show fear. He threw another punch, and the old man blocked it this time with what felt like a steel tricep, and then immediately countered. The flurry of blows into Jimbo's torso stunned him, the young man unable to even keep track of each hit, they were so fast. His opponent's fist connected with his jaw in a vicious uppercut, and he flew backwards, hitting the mat with a hard thud.
"Next time you should respect your elders,"
the old man said casually as he started to remove his gloves. Before he could react, what felt like a brick house barreled into his back and he hit the floor. Ted and Frank began kicking him, and he tried to reach up to catch a leg but had to concede that it was too much, curling into the fetal position to defend himself. A third leg joined in, and he peeked around his arm to see that Jimbo had joined his dishonorable friends.
"You ain't so tough, are you, soldier boy?"
Ted cried, thick drawl echoing across the gym. A few of the other gym patrons hopped into the ring and pulled the young firecrackers off of the old man.
"You shouldn't have come back to this town, you coward,"
Frank spit as he struggled against the guy dragging him away. The bloodied man on the floor sat up, gingerly poking at his cheekbone as he righted himself.
"You okay, Rutger?"
David asked, and leaned down to help him to his feet.
"Yeah, I've had worse,"
Rutger replied, patting the owner of the gym on the arm as he steadied himself on his feet. He accepted the offered towel from his friend and dabbed gently at his nose. "Look, I knew your daddy. Him and I were friends," David said slowly, running a shaky hand through his grey hair. "Frankly, it's the only reason I agreed to let you into this gym after your, military difficulties."
"David, it's okay. I understand,"
Rutger assured him. I'm sorry, Rutger. I just can't have this sort of thing in my gym. The older man frowned, his wrinkled jowls deepening the expression almost comically. It's hard enough keeping the doors open in the off-season. David, it's cool, the younger man said, and offered a smile. I'll manage. Promise. He turned and ducked under the ropes of the ring, wincing as he straightened up. At least one of his ribs was surely bruised. Rutger, wait, David said, and leaned on the top rope, lips pursed, and lowered his gravelly voice. If you want, come by here tomorrow night around closing. I'll have a key made so you can come work out after hours. Thanks, David, the younger man replied, his dark eyes softening at the sincere expression in his old friend's face. He reached out his clean hand, and they shook firmly. Chapter 2. Mel's Diner was known for miles around as the place to go for country fried steak. It was one of the only shops still open in the off-season, and the heart and soul of the small downtown core. Rutger trudged in like his shoes were made of lead and took his regular seat in the booth against the back wall. He gazed down the seating area, which was essentially a long tube of black and white checkered tile with booths on one side and a counter on the other. The giant fan mounted in the kitchen wall kept the cooks from overheating, and the squeak of each rapid undulation was almost comforting. He was pretty sure that same fan had been here when he was a kid. That same sharp old metal with that same squeak, squeak, squeak. Jojo was the lone waitress that night, an early 50s southern lass that looked like she'd been around the block a few times. She checked on the two middle-aged couples on her way to Rutger's table and set a cup of coffee down in front of him. You look like you could use this, hon, she said with a note of concern in her voice. Thanks, Jojo, he said with a smile, and wrapped a hand around the warm mug. The coffee here was one step up from sludge, but it was caffeine. Rough night at the gym? She inquired, as she pulled the pencil from behind her ear. Yeah, you could say that. Rutger shrugged and took a sip of the black liquid. One of the 3 farm workers scattered along the far booths hollered for her attention, and she waved at him to acknowledge she was coming. You want your usual? She asked Rutger. Yep, he said with a grin. You know I can't get enough of your special gravy. Well, if you ever get around to taking me out, maybe I can say the same thing about you. Jojo winked and sashayed off down the line of booths, leaving Rutger to grimace into his coffee cup. The mental image of the sloppy waitress enjoying his gravy made him die a little inside. The bell over the door tinkled happily as a man in dirty jeans and a wool poncho walked in and stopped right inside the door. Just seat yourself anywhere you like, hon, and I'll be right over, Jojo called as she stepped around the counter to put in Rutger's order. He watched the man curiously, just standing there motionless in the doorway. He couldn't get a good look at his face, as it was shrouded in the woolen hood of the poncho. But there was something in the air then, something that made his stomach sink. Sir? Jojo returned from around the counter, wrinkling her nose at the dirt caking the new patron's clothes. Are you okay? He lifted his arm ever so slowly, a gloved hand peeking out from the tasseled hem of the poncho. He rolled the woolen fabric back, revealing crusty and decrepit skin. It looked like someone had taken a cheese grater to a roll of toilet paper, and Jojo simply stared at it with wide eyes. When his nasty forearm was parallel to her face, he took a deep breath, and then blew hard, flakes of skin flying right into the waitress's disgusted face. She recoiled in horror, squeezing her eyes shut for a split second. But then her demeanor changed completely, and she stood at attention, back ramrod straight. Rutger's blood ran cold at the sight, a cold death in her eyes, as if they weren't seeing anything anymore. The lower lids began to pool with redness, and as crimson spilled over the edge to waterfall down her face, he realized it was blood. Her eyes were bleeding. Her cheeks began to crack and bubble, sores pushing through her thick foundation to explode, pus oozing down her face like sludge. "Hey, Jojo, more coffee over here," one of the ladies on the far side called, clearly having not paid attention to the altercation happening by the front door. The waitress turned on her heel and stalked over to the table, snatching up a steak knife from one of the farm workers on the way. She plunged it into the back of the woman's neck, her head hitting the table as Jojo continued to stab her over and over. The man across the table shook himself free of his shock and lunged forward, catching the knife-happy waitress around the waist and wrestling her arms behind her back. The knife clattered to the floor, and the remaining patrons took this as their cue to dart into the kitchen, as the entrance was blocked by the mysterious newcomer. Rutger stayed in his seat, simply watching the events unfold, trying to stay subjective and suspend his disbelief at what was happening before his very eyes. The newcomer took a deep breath and blew more of his flaky skin towards Jojo and her captor, the latter taking a faceful and immediately letting go of the waitress. The two of them spun on their heels and stalked to the kitchen door, pounding on it with fists that were forming even more bulging pustules. The cooks and patrons held the door, screaming as they took in the bleeding faces through the window. The poncho-wearing catalyst turned his head towards the kitchen fan and turned his hand towards himself, taking his pinky finger and snapping it clean off. He tossed it into the wall fan, and the rapidly spinning blades easily chopped the intensely dry digit into dust. The screaming in the kitchen came to a halt as the powdered finger coated the kitchen, and the brick forming in Rutger's stomach gave him a kick. It was time for him to attack this situation head-on. He strolled up behind the mystery man and grabbed his shoulder, spinning him right around. The force of it caused the hood of the poncho to fall back, revealing the face of a man who looked like he'd gone bobbing for apples in industrial waste. His skin was melted with burns and boils, his left eye sagging in its socket so deep it looked like it was about to fall off.
"Holy shit," Rutger said. "You need to moisturize."
The scarred man raised his hand quickly and poofed a cloud of skin dust point-blank into his new opponent's face. Rutger chuffed in annoyance, blowing off his face and brushing off the front of his jacket.
"Really, dude?"
he groaned, and caught a quick flash of confusion in the melted man's face. He stumbled back in shock and snapped the fingers on his less mangled hand, causing one of the cooks to leap over the bar counter like an ape. He sprung through the air and tackled Rutger right into the front door, shattering the glass and sending them tumbling to the concrete outside. The ex-Delta Force reacted by reflex, smashing the cook's face with his elbow and leaping to his feet. He spun in a tight circle, his boot connecting with the cook's head. As his opponent slumped to the concrete, Rutger glanced up through the broken glass to meet the livid eyes of the melted man. The decrepit poncho-wearing newcomer lowered his chin, and the swarm of possessed diner workers and patrons surged towards the busted door.
"Fuck,"
Rutger grunted, and took off running towards his truck. He retrieved his keys from his pocket as he bolted, flung open the door and dove inside, slamming it behind him. The engine roared to life as 4 diner zombies reached the truck, and he popped it into reverse, flooring the gas pedal with as much force as he could muster. Jojo leapt up onto the front bumper just in time, pulling her now completely blistered body up onto the hood. Rutger snapped the handbrake and did a 180 turn, flinging her into one of the storefronts like a rag doll. He couldn't help but pause a second as her body crumpled to the ground, but at the thud of his pursuers jumping into the bed of the truck, he floored the gas. He sped down the highway, bobbing and weaving to try to dislodge the 2 diner zombies still attached to his vehicle. They started to crawl onto the roof, and upon seeing a gnarled hand snake down over the front windshield, he hit the brakes hard and they both went flying. He wasted no time in speeding off, glancing in the rearview mirror to see 2 shadowy figures peeling themselves off of the asphalt to stagger after him. Chapter 3. Rutger parked his car and hopped out, heart still rattling around in his chest like a jackhammer. He didn't know what the hell was going on, but he was going to find out. He slammed the truck door as he darted inside, throwing all of his deadbolts closed with expert ease. He moved swiftly into the front room while removing his still dusty jacket, tossing it on the hallway table. He immediately picked up the phone and dialed 911, and slammed the receiver down at the sound of a busy signal. He ran his finger down the piece of paper next to the phone and dialed the number for the local police station directly. Ring, ring. Click.
"Hello? Can anybody hear me?"
Rutger demanded, but the only answer was a clatter in the background, as if somebody had dropped the receiver. At the sound of screams and gunshots, he gripped the edge of the table.
"Oh, God, help me!"
A voice pleaded from the other end.
"Help me!"
More gunshots. Rutger dropped the phone, letting it hang from the cord off of the edge of the table, wandering away as the screams faded. Cops becoming zombies, likely. He reached his desk and opened the top drawer, revealing a 9mm and a clip. He slammed the clip in with a deadly-sounding click and cocked the gun.
"Okay, Rutger, now what?"
he asked himself, turning and leaning on the desk. He chewed his lip for a moment and then darted back over to the phone, pushing down on the hang-up button a few times before finding the dial tone once again. He dialed another number from the paper.
"Yeah,"
a familiar gruff voice asked from the other end. "Ronnie, it's Rutger."
"What's up, brother?"
The voice brightened.
"You changed your mind about joining up with us?"
"We can talk about that later." Rutger shook his head. "You boys need to seal up that compound and do it now."
"Man, look at you,"
Ronnie replied with amusement.
"Not even a member yet, and you are already barking out orders."
"Listen to me," Rutger pleaded. "Some weird shit just went down at the diner. Jojo chopped a woman's head off, and one of the cooks tackled me out of the front goddamn door."
"Wait, Jojo did what?"
Ronnie blurted in confusion.
"That don't make any sense. Boy, you on the sauce again?"
"Ronnie, I'm not fucking around." Rutger barked harshly, begging for compliance with his no-nonsense tone. "There was this guy, all kinds of fucked up. He blew something in their face and they just went insane. I called the police station and it sounds like they're overrun. You guys are only a couple miles away from downtown. Thought you'd want to know and take appropriate action." There was a moment of silence, and if it weren't for the ragged breathing, he would have thought he'd been hung up on.
"Okay, Rutger,"
Ronnie said finally.
"You ain't usually one to get freaked out, so I'm gonna take your word this is serious."
"Thank you." Rutger let out a deep breath of relief.
"This is what I'm gonna do,"
Ronnie continued.
"The boys are gonna seal the front gate and stand guard. I'll make sure they know to expect you. How long do you think it'll take for you to get here?"
"Few hours, probably," Rutger said. "I don't really want to go through town, you know?"
"All right, buddy. You be safe,"
came the reply.
"We'll be on the lookout for you."
The click almost sounded like a nail in a coffin, and Rutger stared at the receiver for a moment before gathering himself. He hung up and headed towards his bedroom, where he kept his go-bag for emergency situations. He froze as he passed the front window, seeing the two diner zombies from the highway stalking towards the house.
"Motherfucker,"
he muttered, and cocked his gun. The sound of tires squealed in the distance and headlights screamed up the road, straight for the house. Rutger watched with fascination as a black car slammed into the two diner zombies, pinning them under the front wheels. The doors open in perfect synchronicity, and two men in suits stepped out, circled around, and put a bullet in each of their heads. One of them pulled out a bag, and the other started for the door. Rutger ducked before he could be seen, holding his gun at the ready. Knock, knock. "Sir, please open the door." The voice was controlled, but the urgency was there. If they were some kind of federal agency, and they were nervous, then shit was really bad. "We need to talk to you about the incident at the diner." Rutger chewed his lip for a moment before answering. They obviously knew he was in there. "I was just defending myself, officer," he replied, raising the pitch of his voice a bit to sound less threatening.
If you can find anybody who isn't drugged out of their mind, they'll back me up."
"Sir, I'm not an officer, and we know you aren't at fault," the man assured him. "We are from the agency, and we are here to deal with whatever creature you encountered."
"Creature?"
An image of a melted face with angry eyes flashed in Rutger's mind, and he shuddered.
"What are you talking about?"
"Sir, please open the door," the agent reiterated. "We will explain everything." He knew he had to. What did he have to lose at this point? He'd called the cops and they were a no-go. So this was the next best thing, no? Rutger opened the door reluctantly, revealing the two suited twins.
"Sir, The name's Rutger," he insisted.
"Rutger, can we please come in?" the first agent asked. "It's a little dangerous to be standing out here."
"Yeah, sure. Just no sudden moves until I know what's going on,"
Rutger replied, revealing his gun. The agent nodded. "Fair enough." They strode into the front room as he closed the door behind them. "I'm Agent Wiggins. This is Agent Johnson." The first man introduced them as Johnson set up a laptop on the desk.
"All right, let's hear it," Rutger prompted with a nod. "What the fuck is going on?"
"Sir, you experienced a demon attack at the diner," Johnson spoke up. Rutger stared at them blankly for a moment.
"Oh, okay."
He scrubbed his hands down the sides of his face.
"How could you tell? Did you have cameras in the diner or something?"
"No, sir. We got a hit on our satellite imagery that showed an intense concentration of demon activity," Wiggins explained. "We were able to watch as you fled the scene and came here. Before we confront this particular demon, we need to know what we are up against. We're hoping that you can help us fill in the gaps." He crossed his arms across his chest and leaned back against the wall. "So, can you tell us what you saw?"
"Sure thing," Rutger sighed. "In a nutshell, this fucked-up-looking dude came into the diner, blew his skin flakes into people's faces, and they went batshit. A 50-year-old waitress breathed it in, and 20 seconds later she was using a steak knife to fillet a woman who wanted more coffee."
The agents shared a quick look that Rutger wasn't sure he liked. "Sir, this is very important," Wiggins began. "Did this demon breathe anything onto you?"
"Yep," came the reply. "Headbutted the motherfucker after he did, too."
The agents immediately drew their guns, training them at their informant's face.
Whoa, what the hell, man?" Rutger explained. "I'm answering your questions."
"Put your gun on the ground," Wiggins barked. "Hands up! Do it now!" He moved forward a step, and the older man tossed the gun on the carpet, raising his hands above his head.
"Okay, calm down there, buddy. I'm complying," he said calmly,
and Wiggins took another step forward. One more step and Rutger lashed out, grabbing his arm and throwing it back, using the momentum to grab his head and slam it down onto the table. He held the agent's head against his jacket on the table, bending his gun arm back at a painful angle. Wiggins cried out briefly before quieting. "Okay, you made your point. Let him go," Johnson warned, his gun still pointed.
"Put down the gun there, bucko," Rutger countered. "You don't, and I'm going to snap his arm. Maybe worse."
The agent sighed and set his gun on the desk. Rutger released his prisoner and backed away, eyes on Johnson as he moved towards his discarded gun. Wiggins turned around slowly, revealing bloody smears beneath his eyes and boils cropping up along his cheekbones.
"Johnson," Rutger gulped, "pick your gun back up."
It was too late. Wiggins leapt onto his partner and they toppled over, smashing his head into the floor.
"Let him go!" Rutger cried. "Let him go right now, goddammit!"
After the wet squelch of blunt force trauma, Rutger fired twice, catching the demonic agent in the back. He exploded into a cloud of dust, and the older man immediately bent down to check Johnson. No pulse.
"Baptiste here."
A voice came out of the laptop.
Hello? Agent Johnson? Agent Wiggins?"
Rutger slowly got to his feet, into view of the computer. A young man with kind, confused eyes stared out at him. "Oh, hello, sir. Perhaps you can help me. I'm looking for 2 well-dressed agents who are nearby. Could you please let them know I'm on the line for them?"
I'm sorry, but they are both dead," Rutger sighed.
"Did you kill them, sir?"
Baptiste raised an eyebrow.
"No. Well, maybe. Only one of them, possibly."
Could you be a little more vague, sir?
I'm sorry. Been a hell of a day, Rutger sighed, not even irritated by the sarcasm from the polite man. So these two showed up at my door, claiming to be from the agency, whatever the hell that is. They wanted to know about the diner incident, and as I was laying it out for them, one of them pulled a gun on me. I disarmed him, and a few seconds later he went crazy like the people at the diner and killed his partner. I kinda put him down after that, which caused him to explode in a puff of dust. So you can see my hesitation for taking the blame for killing them.
I understand, sir,
came the understanding reply.
And I do apologize for the position you currently find yourself in. My name is Baptiste. Who do I have the pleasure of speaking to?
Name's Rutger.
Rutger, let me lay it out for you,
Baptiste said.
There is a pestilence demon on the loose in your town, and you may be the only one who can stop it.
Pestilence Demon?
Rutger scrubbed his hands down his face.
Are you shitting me?
No, sir, I am deadly serious.
Okay.
The ex-Delta Force soldier nodded. What was even the point of resisting at this point?
I'm listening.
Is this the demon from the diner?
Baptiste lifted a photo to the camera. The face was incredibly familiar, just a little less melted.
Yeah, I think.
Rutger bit his lip.
Only the guy I saw was a lot more fucked up.
This is what we classify as a pestilence demon,
Baptiste explained.
This particular one is named King Leper.
King Leper? Really?
The older man didn't even know why he was surprised anymore.
Yes, colorful, I know.
Baptiste nodded.
In a nutshell, pestilence demons are regular demons who have been unable to feed for many years, often decades. The lack of fresh souls causes the demon infestation to begin to eat itself. This results in the demon looking like a heavily infected leper. When they reach this status, they can easily infect humans who breathe in their shedding skin. Those humans become deathly ill and completely under the control of the pestilence demon that infected them. To make matters worse, when those infected are killed, they explode in the puff of dust you witnessed, which is also highly infectious. King Leper was dropped down a dried-up well back in the 80s that was subsequently filled in. One of our maintenance teams found that something had dug itself out about a month ago, so we were on the lookout. We had no idea he'd be able to get this far.
Holy hell, Rutger rubbed his forehead. That's a lot to take in.
That's what your mama said.
The older man blinked at his new acquaintance.
Excuse me?
My apologies, sir.
Baptiste coughed.
It's a reflex brought on by my boss.
It's cool, man.
Rutger shrugged.
Now,
the agent recomposed himself.
I have some questions for you. I need to know your background. I need to find out why you weren't infected.
Kinda curious about that myself, Rutger replied. Okay, well, I'm ex-Delta Force, got dishonorably discharged back in 2008.
May I ask why?
You want the company line? Rutger rolled his eyes. Or the real reason that nobody wants to believe?
Sir, I deal in a world where pestilence demons are a thing. Chances are I'll believe you.
Fair enough,
the ex-soldier conceded with a nod.
My squad was at this Afghan outpost that was closer to the moon than anything resembling civilization. We got approached by some shady-looking higher-ups that were looking for a volunteer for a vaccine project. I guess the first red flag I should have picked up on was that they were doing this in the middle of a hot zone, but I was gung-ho about serving my country every way I could, so I volunteered. They took me to this compound built into the side of a mountain. Real complex science shit. There was this doctor, I think his name was Dr. Schultz. He injected me with this stuff, said it was to protect me against bioweaponry. I don't remember much over the next week as the stuff made me sicker than I have ever been. When I woke up, the facility was emptied out except for a few MPs and a 4-star. He thanked me for my service and said my sacrifice was invaluable and would save countless lives. He then informed me that my squad had been wiped out in an attack, and that I had two choices. They could take me back to the site and burn me with the rest of my squad, or they could claim I was a deserter, get a dishonorable discharge, and go into exile for several years. They needed a plausible cover story as to why I wasn't with them during the attack, so I chose the latter and spent several years honing my skills in the Orient. But that's another story.
It's all making sense,
Baptiste replied.
Dr. Schultz is a highly regarded scientist that was using demon artifacts as a way to combat other conditions. Whatever biotoxin he was using you to develop a vaccine for must have made you immune to the Pestilence Demon. In fact, it's possible his testing on you helped develop the vaccine we use for our own agents.
If you have a vaccine, then why did this guy go batshit crazy? Rutger asked.
Unfortunately, the vaccine has a short half-life, so each injection only gives a few days' worth of protection.
Baptiste explained.
Whatever concoction he gave you ended up being more permanent, apparently.
Well, great mystery solved, Rutger shrugged. So I got a question for you. Baptiste nodded.
Okay.
What the fuck am I supposed to do now? The ex-soldier's voice raised an octave in volume. I have this king leper asshole running around my town turning people into pestilence zombies.
Well, normally we have a lengthy review process before bringing someone into the agency, but given your military service and the fact you're all I have at the moment, allow me to be the first to officially welcome you to the agency.
Baptiste smiled brightly. Rutger deadpanned. Yay.
Okay, now that we have that taken care of, the next question. Do you have weapons?
I'm ex-Delta Force and live in rural America. What do you think? Rutger scoffed.
Please disregard the previous question.
Baptiste corrected.
Once you are armed, you need to figure out a way to dissolve King Leper.
Dissolve him? Can I just pop this motherfucker in the head and call it a day?
Well, you can, but it won't stop him.
The agent shook his head.
Bullets have little effect on demons this powerful.
So, dissolving it is, then?
Yes, dissolve.
Baptiste nodded. His flesh is the contagious part, so if you can destroy that, we'll be good to go. Will dismemberment work? Rutger inquired. I saw him break off his pinky finger and use it to infect people.
Unfortunately, no, as pestilence demons can attach new flesh.
Baptiste replied.
It isn't instantaneous, but after a few days, the new limb will be ready to infect.
What about fire? Rutger mused.
As a last resort, this could buy some time.
Baptiste acquiesced.
Normal fire just isn't going to be hot enough to melt away the flesh. So unless you are able to make some thermite, all it would do is immobilize him for a bit.
Fantastic.
So what do you have in town?
Baptiste asked. There's a hardware store, and that's about it.
If they have hydrofluoric acid, that would work best.
Dude, it's a small town. Rutger threw his hands up. We're lucky if we have more than 2 beer brands to pick from.
The next best option is lye. It's a slow burn, but if you can trap him somehow, it will do the trick.
Great. So the plan is to find some lye, put it in a barrel, and chop a pestilence demon into tiny bits and throw him in while avoiding his infected army of the damned, who all want to kill me. Rutger summarized flatly.
Good. You understand your mission.
Baptiste nodded. So what do I do about the infected?
Whatever you deem necessary.
The agent said gravely.
They are infected and are going to die in a matter of days. If you are able to start the dissolving process on King Leper, they won't be mind-controlled any longer, but they'll be gone by the weekend.
So there's nothing that can be done for them? Rutger asked, incredulous. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the assholes in this town, but they don't deserve to go out like that.
I'm sorry, but there is no known cure.
Just make me a promise. Rutger held up his finger. If I help you take this motherfucker down, you will do what you can for them.
You have my word, sir.
Baptiste promised. Good enough for me.
Okay, before you go, look inside the agent's bag.
Baptiste instructed.
There should be an earpiece.
Rutger rummaged around in the discarded duffel bag and produced a small black earpiece that he held up to the laptop in question.
This will allow me to keep in touch with you.
Baptiste explained.
I'm going to be sending you some assistance. I have an agent and a new recruit nearby, and I think they can be useful.
Just make sure they take their vaccines, Rutger warned. I don't want to be cleaning up another dust pile.
Will do.
Baptiste nodded.
Contact me with status updates or any questions.
The new agent nodded and shut the laptop. He pushed the earpiece into his right ear and turned to enter the den. He grasped the edge of a specific bookcase and shoved it out of the way, revealing his weapons stash. After strapping on his ninja sword, a handgun with fresh clips, and an assault rifle with a mid- and long-range swappable scope, he sighed. Some days, I wonder if I shouldn't have taken the first option.
Chapter 4. The crickets were out in full force that night, nature unperturbed by the demon activity all around it. As Rutger parked his truck in the bushes on the side of the highway and hopped out, he vaguely wondered if the pestilence dust would have any effect on animals or insects. He was quite sure that he didn't want to find out. Bleeding, murderous swarms of crickets were not on his bucket list that night, though neither were bleeding, murderous swarms of townsfolk either. He ducked down the ATV path that would lead him back into town under the cover of brush and darkness. He moved at a brisk pace, not quite a run, but faster than a jog, weapons slung around him and fingers firmly on the handgun. He froze at the sight of two silhouettes in the moonlight down the path, and ducked and rolled quickly into the bushes. Rutger stood up behind a thick tree and peeked around it, getting a closer look at two boil-covered faces. He raised the gun, but then thought better of it. The noise might attract unwanted attention. He needed to be stealthy. He holstered the 9mm and unsheathed the long sword on his back. His back pressed to the tree trunk, he waited for the mindless drones to shuffle past him. As soon as they were level with his hiding tree, Rutger burst out onto the path. He put his first opponent into a headlock and then plunged the sword right through the head of the second. The impaled zombie flopped over, taking the sword with it so that it swayed back and forth upright, as if somebody had driven it into the ground like a signpost. Rutger spun and shoved the headlocked figure into the tree, snatching up his sword and lunging forward in a flash to bury it into his opponent's gut. The infected man growled at him, seemingly unaffected by the stabbing, and the ex-soldier sliced upwards, gutting his enemy from belly button to chin. Guts spilled everywhere, wet organs slapping against tree leaves, and the creature finally fell. Rutger stepped back out onto the path and wiped the blade clean of blood on the first dead guy's shirt. He sighed and sheathed the sword, resuming his combat walk with the handgun back towards town. The hardware store wasn't too difficult to get to through the back alleys. He had to stop and duck a few times to avoid being seen by passing infected, but soon he reached the fire escape in the back and climbed to the top of the 2-story building. He jogged to the front sign, staying low, and sank down on his haunches under cover. He peeked through the hole in one of the A's and was surprised at the flurry of activity down on the street. A few dozen of King Leper's mind slaves were moving bodies off of the road into a considerable pile on the street corner. Others were loading goods into several waiting cars. He tapped his earpiece and produced a set of binoculars, squatting behind the A to get a better look. "Baptiste, you there?" he whispered.
"Yes? What's the situation?"
Baptiste replied immediately.
"It's a fucking war zone down here," Rutger said. "Bodies are everywhere, and those infected zombie things are looking incredibly busy."
"Might I inquire as to what they are doing?"
So polite, even in times of crisis.
"They are packing up cars," Rutger explained, examining the cars with his binoculars. "There are half a dozen large sedans in the middle of the street. I can't be certain, but it looks like they're putting gas cans in the trunk. What the hell are they trying to do? Make the world's wimpiest car bomb?"
"If only that were the case."
Baptiste sounded apologetic.
"No, I fear his plan is much more sinister."
"Well, out with it," Rutger promised. "What am I up against?"
"Do you want the good news or the bad news first?"
"Wait," the ex-soldier blinked. "There's good news in all of this?"
"Of sorts,"
Baptiste replied.
"If I'm correct in my thinking, 25 or 30 of the infected are going to be driving off in the near future. So the good news is you'll have less of them to deal with."
"Almost afraid to ask how that equates to bad news."
"Your hesitation is well-founded, sir."
The agent paused.
"I fear as though his plan is to start a pandemic."
"How the hell is he going to do that with only a couple dozen goons?"
"There are 2 major cities within a few hours' drive of your current location,"
Baptiste explained.
"The infected will be able to get there before dawn and find their way to the ventilation system of high-rise buildings."
And let me guess, this King Leper asshole can command them to shoot themselves in the head.
Rutger's head felt light.
That is correct,
Baptiste confirmed.
In a matter of moments, 25 infected become an army of 25,000. From there, untold thousands will die every hour until the king is dealt with.
So, ticking time bomb.
Rutger let out a low, humorless chuckle.
This day just keeps getting better and better.
I have faith in you, sir.
Well, that makes one of us,
Rutger retorted. The zombies finished packing up their cars, hopped inside, and peeled out down the road.
They're on the move, so the clock is officially ticking.
Can you make it to the hardware store?
Baptiste inquired.
I'm on the roof, Rutger replied. I'm going to head down and see what I can find.
Contact me as soon as you can,
the attaché said.
I will also update your backup, Nance, on your current location.
Got it. Rutger out.
He tapped the earpiece to end the call, and jogged back over to the ladder to climb down. As soon as his boots hit the asphalt, he ducked behind a dumpster to avoid a few more passing zombies. He darted back into the alleyway once the coast was clear, and slithered along the side wall to the main road. Upon jiggling the handle of the front door of the hardware store, Rutger found it locked, of course. He glanced over his shoulder to make sure there were no infected townspeople nearby, and then slammed his elbow into the glass. The old door shattered to pieces, and he flinched at the loud clatter that echoed across the streets. There was a scream around the corner.
Shit.
Rutger dove through the broken door, ducking behind a display of 99-cent duct tape. He stared through one of the rolls as 3 zombies bustled inside, and then branched off, each taking an aisle. He drew his gun and held his breath as one of them approached, a 20-something man with fists clenched, blood streaming down his face to stain his plaid shirt. Just as Rutger aimed his gun through one of the duct tape rolls, the shelving unit behind him groaned and fell towards him. He dropped his hands and ducked low, abandoning his shot to keep his head from getting crushed. The shelving unit caught on a support beam above, raining various small boxes of screws and washers down on him. The plaid guy dove into the shelf tunnel, causing Rutger to kick backwards, scrambling as best he could on his ass to get out the other side. He dodged arms shooting down through the shelves at him from above, one of the infected enemies having climbed up on top to try to get at him. As he got to the opening at the end of the shelf tunnel, a pair of arms grasped him around the chest.
"Oh, no, you don't,"
Rutger warned, pointing his gun directly over his shoulder to blow the face off of his captor. Brains splattered all over the ceiling, smacking into the face of the overall-wearing woman leaping from atop the tunnel at him. He aimed and caught her in the shoulder as Plaid Guy rushed him, tackling him to the ground. The gun clattered away and Rutger grunted, bringing his knee up into his attacker's stomach. He flipped him up over his head, following the momentum to land on top of him, curling one of his legs around the back of Plaid Guy's neck. He squeezed his calves together, applying as much pressure as he could to the wriggling infected townsboy.
Come on,
Rutger grunted, pressing harder until there was a satisfying snap as Plaid Guy's neck snapped in two. The body went limp, and the ex-Delta got to his feet with a groan, stepping over to retrieve his gun. As he holstered it, he turned and realized the woman in the overalls slowly regaining her footing.
"Really?"
Rutger sighed.
"You couldn't just stay down?"
As she opened her mouth to shriek at him, he unsheathed his sword and brought it down in a fluid motion, taking off the top left half of her head. A wimpy moan left her mouth as she joined her comrades on the floor, and Rutger sheathed his sword, shaking his head at the carnage.
"All right, let's find that lie,"
he muttered to himself, and turned on his heel. He pulled his assault rifle, knees bent as he crept down the paint aisle to the back of the store. Against the back wall, a bright yellow sales sticker advertised an empty lie shelf. He groaned softly, but raised the rifle at the sound of shuffling behind the rubber strips separating the main room from the storeroom. He nosed the tip of the rifle between two strips and gently eased it to the side, peeking in at the sound of spraying water. His blood turned to ice at the sight of 2 infected townspeople dumping what looked like the last jug of lye down into a floor drain and washing it down with a hose. "No!" he screamed and pulled the trigger, riddling the two zombies with bullets in his desperation. They flew backwards, the hose slapping the concrete floor like a nail in the coffin as Rutger hurried forward to see if they'd gotten it all. He lifted every jug, and they were all empty. His heart pounding harder with each light canister, he threw the last one against the wall in frustration, letting out a sharp yell.
"Sorry to disappoint you,"
a cracked voice rasped from the shadows. Rutger took a step back, raising the rifle, as King Leper himself emerged into the flickering fluorescent light of the storeroom.
"Oh, so you can speak," he snapped, while taking stock of his options.
The rubber curtain was just about as far behind him as the loading bay doors on the far side.
"Some,"
his demonic enemy slurred.
"It's been a long time since I've had the need." "Well, don't get too comfortable, because you aren't going to need it very long,"
Rutger warned, preparing his stance to fire. King Leper simply chuckled, a lilting, ghastly sound that gave the X-Delta pause. He furrowed his brow, and the nose of the rifle dropped a touch, as he strained his ears to see what the demon was laughing at. It was an odd standoff, with a gunman and an unarmed, smirking pestilence demon, the former very unsettled and ready to be done with it. Nothing happened. Rutger peppered a few shots into King Leper's torso, and the bullets whipped straight through in little puffs of dust.
"Shit,"
he pursed his lips, lowering the gun in disdain.
"Well, that didn't work."
"No," the demon grinned, showing a toothless, decaying smile.
"It didn't."
He took in a sharp, ragged breath and let out a piercing scream, a high-pitched shriek that was a hell of a lot stronger than the harsh rasp of his speaking voice. The loading bay doors flung open, and a huge pack of infected townspeople bustled inside, as if on call. Rutger backed up towards the rubber-curtained doorway, unloading more bullets wildly across the throng of attackers. Bodies dropped in puffs of dust, but many were still in pursuit as he dove through the curtain. He ran full tilt for the front of the store, slinging the rifle back over his shoulder so he could pump his arms faster. He leapt through the broken glass of the front door and skidded into the middle of the street. A small, infected army ran towards him, about 50 yards away, and he blinked dumbly in shock until the crunch of the hardware store's front door being ripped from its hinges startled him. He turned on his heel and sprinted down the street in the opposite direction of the horde, blood pounding in his ears and almost drowning out the sound of a roaring car engine. He looked over his shoulder to see a dark blue sedan crash through the army and speed towards him, a zombie clinging to the roof. It skidded to a stop next to him, and he drew his handgun, popping the infected woman in the forehead. The windows rolled down, and a well-built guy with brown hair leaned over, eyes wild. "What are you waiting for?" he cried. "Get in!" "Right." Rutger dove headfirst into the back passenger window as his savior hit the gas, leaving tire tracks on the asphalt as the town people screamed after them. "You okay?" the driver asked, glancing into the rearview mirror at the shell-shocked-looking ex-soldier. Rutger just blinked at him. "What?" "Are you okay?" he asked again, raising his eyebrows with impatience.
"Oh, yeah."
The bewildered man threw his hands up.
"Just peachy. Just been a long evening of gunning down my neighbors because they've turned into Pestilence Demon-infected zombies. You know, the usual."
"Yeah, Baptiste filled me in on the details." The driver waved him off. "Were you able to get the lie?" Rutger barked a laugh, motioning to the empty seat.
"Did you see me jump in with an armful of shopping bags?"
He narrowly missed hitting the back of the passenger seat with his face as his rescuer slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt. "Where is the lie?" He turned right around in his seat, face stern.
"It's gone."
"What do you mean, it's gone?"
"I mean that King Leper asshole knew that's what I would be going for," Rutger snapped, chin jutting out. "So he had his minions dump it down the drain."
The driver scrubbed a hand down his face, jaw clenched. He saw the horde still giving chase in the distance, and straightened in his seat, punching the gas again. "We're in trouble," he said sternly.
"Gee, you think?"
Rutger asked in exasperation. The brunette dug his cell phone out of his pocket, hitting a button and then tossing it on the passenger seat.
"Agent Nance, have you made contact with Rutger yet?"
A voice came through loud and clear, and the ex-Delta recognized it as Baptiste. "Yeah, he's in the car with me," Nance replied.
"I'm here, Baptiste,"
Rutger put in, clutching the seat back and leaning forward.
"Were you successful in your mission?"
The attaché asked.
"King Leopard destroyed the lie before I got there,"
came the reply, and a disappointed shake of the head.
"That is unfortunate."
Baptiste clucked his tongue. "So is it time for a fire drill?" Nance cut in as he turned left onto a dirt road.
"I spoke with the boss to authorize it should the mission fail, and he agreed it was the only option."
The voice on the other end sounded regretful.
"Unfortunately, the payload won't reach the town until an hour after his infection squad reaches civilization."
"Wait, what's a fire drill?"
Rutger asked, putting up a hand. "What sort of casualty projections are there?" Nance ignored him, brow knit together.
"Conservative estimates have it at 45,000.
Baptiste replied.
"Hey, what's a fire drill?"
Rutger tried to cut in again, throat beginning to constrict in pain. "You going to have sweep teams ready?" the driver asked.
"They are en route as we speak,"
Baptiste assured him.
"What is a goddamn fire drill?"
Rutger roared, slamming his fist down onto the center console. Nance didn't even flinch, the only recognition a flick of his eyes into the rear view to meet his passenger's wild gaze. "In a nutshell, we are going to have our attack choppers firebomb the fuck out of your small town," he explained, "which will hopefully stun King Leopard long enough for our sweep teams to locate him and get him put in a vat of acid."
"So, that's it?"
Rutger swallowed hard, hands clenched in his lap.
"You're going to just burn a town full of people to ash?"
"I'm sorry, Rutger. I know I said I would do what I could for your townspeople,"
Baptiste said with sincerity in his voice.
"But without that lie, we don't have much of an option."
"No, Baptiste. You gave me your word,"
the ex-Delta replied through clenched teeth.
"That's a big difference. These people don't deserve to go out like that."
He wanted to smash the door right out of the car, he was so angry. Nance watched the passion in his passenger's face and couldn't help but take pity on him. This was his town, his people. "Baptiste, how much time do we have before the birds get here?" he asked.
"You have 4 hours,"
came the reply. "All right, Rutger, you heard the man," Nance said with a nod. "We have 4 hours to do something. You know this town, so think. What can we use?" The ex-soldier met the agent's gaze, and he took a deep, ragged breath, unclenching his fists. His eyes thanked his rescuer for the second chance, for suggesting they at least try. A light bulb went off in his head.
"The high school."
"Gonna have to be a little more specific there," Nance furrowed his brow.
"The high school on the edge of town got shut down in the early 90s, Rutger explained. "The budget was cut, and it was literally boarded up over the weekend. I had to spend half my senior year driving an hour away to another school just to graduate. That science lab was loaded up with chemicals, not to mention the janitor's closet. There's got to be some lie in there."
"So how are you going to lure him to the high school?"
Baptiste inquired.
"We're going to have to make a pit stop," Rutger continued. "But I think I can get my hands on something that will attract his attention."
"Okay, Baptiste, we're improvising," Nance said firmly, with a nod of his head. "We'll make contact in 3 hours to give you an update."
"Good luck, gentlemen."
Baptiste bid farewell, and there was a click as he hung up the phone on his end. Nance slowed down a bit to take directions. "Okay, Rutger, this is your show," he said. "Where are we off to?" Rutger squared his shoulders.
"How do you feel about militias?"
Chapter 5. Rutger and Nance walked up the last stretch of dirt road towards the compound, not wanting to startle the militia members into bombing an approaching car. The night air was much fresher outside of town, without the looming stench of pestilence-laden flesh and blood. "So how do you know these guys?" the agent inquired as they strolled along the tree line.
"They know I'm ex-military, just like a lot of them are," Rutger began. "About 3 months ago, a couple of them confronted me when they heard about my supposed desertion. Needless to say, they weren't happy with me. Thankfully, the leader, Ronnie, gave me a chance to explain myself."
"What did you tell them?" Nance wondered.
I mostly told them the truth, he shrugged. I volunteered for medical experimentation, then after my unit was wiped out, the military fucked me over and made me out to be a deserter. Luckily, these guys aren't huge fans of the federal government, so they welcomed me into their group.
Wait, Nance stopped short, turning to face his new comrade. You're a member of this militia?
Oh, hell no.
Rutger waved his hands back and forth in front of him.
I don't want anything to do with these anti-government nutwagons. I just remain acquainted with them because, well, I don't really have a lot of people who are friendly towards me. You never know when that friendliness might come in handy.
Like now, you mean? Nance raised an eyebrow and continued walking. Rutger nodded. Like now. The dirt in front of them suddenly exploded with gunfire, puffs of dry road shooting into the air. They immediately split apart and dove to either side of the road, taking cover behind the trees.
Whoa, whoa!
Rutger yelled from his hiding spot.
What the hell, man?
The area lit up as spotlights raked the area.
You motherfuckers better get up on out of here,
a loud voice barked from atop a guard tower, behind the 8-foot-tall fence at the end of the road.
I'm Rutger,
the ex-Delta cried back.
I talked to Ronnie a couple of hours ago and he told me to come up here. I don't give a good goddamn if you're a big-titted stripper with a winning lotto ticket. You're gonna get shot unless you get out of here.
The guard screamed down at them.
God damn it,
Rutger grunted, and then raised his voice again.
Just go tell Ronnie that Rutger is here. Kiss my ass,
the guard barked back. You got any bright ideas, Nance? Rutger turned to look at his companion across the thin road. Yeah, I got one, Nance admitted. Now, you aren't going to freak out when you see some weird shit, are you?
Not sure if this day can get any freakier,
his companion replied with a bewildered shrug. Well, you say that. The agent sighed and removed a blue and black mask from his coat pocket. He began a low chant in what sounded to Rutger like Latin, and the fabric began to glow. It pulsed a deep blue color, growing brighter and brighter with the words, and then Nance threw it up in the air where it froze. The blue glow flashed and became the shape of a person, and then there was a person attached to the mask. He was a stocky, muscular man in full-on wrestling garb, and his feet hit the ground purposefully. Rutger blinked, despite everything he'd seen that day. He hadn't been expecting that.
You, he stammered, you had a luchador in your pocket this entire time?
Don't worry, Nance smirked. I was happy to see you too.
Rutger chuckled,
the tension dissipating from his shoulders. He knew he had to keep his cool. They were on a time limit.
So, how is he going to get past the gun-happy guard over there?
BD, can you gently take out our friend over there? Nance asked.
How gently?
The apparition wrestler replied with a question, and Rutger was surprised at the clarity of his voice. He'd been expecting an old rasp, maybe due to his demon exposure with King Leper. Just bruised, Nance confirmed. He's going to have a long night after we're gone.
I'll take care of it,
BD replied.
BD?
Rutger asked. Blue Diablo, Nance whispered as the wrestler stepped out from the tree line. He approached the gate, strolling towards it like he owned the place.
You better stop right there,
the guard screamed, firing off a few shots near the newcomer's feet. It doesn't even faze him, and he continues his slow walk.
Next shot is going right through your heart, you Mexican motherfucker,
the guard warned, but Blue Diablo continued to move forward.
I warned you!
The guard fired a single round directly into the wrestler's chest. He stopped walking then, looked down at the wound that wasn't leaking even a single drop of blood, and then raised his gaze back up to the guard.
Oh, shit,
the guard blurted as Blue Diablo broke into a run. He disappeared and reappeared almost instantly at the top of the gate, landing a chop onto the surprised guard's exposed shoulder. Rutger stepped out of the tree line, watching as the apparition, or at least what he'd thought was an apparition, slammed his wrist down 3 more times, stunning and disarming the guard. He leapt and scissor-kicked the guard in the head, sending him flying off the side of the tower to the road below. Rutger and Nance strolled up to the fallen guard.
That was impressive, Rutger admitted. Teleporting masked Mexican wrestlers? Wow. Where did you find him at?
Mexico, Nance replied, and the ex-soldier shot him a pointed glare. He rolled his eyes and bent over, grabbing the gate key from the guard's belt. He unlocked it as the agent grabbed their fallen enemy under the armpits and dragged him inside. "It's probably best we bring him with us," Nance grunted as he moved.
"Even after he shot you and your friend there?"
Rutger raised an eyebrow, holding the gate open. "If the infected get here, they could turn him," came the reply as the agent crossed the threshold. "Would rather have him firing his weapon at them than fighting against us." Rutger nodded.
"Fair enough."
Nance dropped the guard and turned to make sure his companion was relocking the gate, when a loud horn bleated. They looked at each other wide-eyed, and then saw the guard had woken up and triggered the compound's alarm on the wall above him.
"You stupid asshole," Rutger yelled. "Turn that off before you get us all killed."
Blue Diablo hurtled down from the guard tower, landing his elbow directly onto the alarm trigger, silencing it. The momentum carried him down into the guard's face, silencing him once again as well.
"Thanks for the assist, big guy."
Rutger nodded to the wrestler, who simply nodded back at him. "We've got to hurry," Nance urged. "That alarm will attract some unwanted attention."
"They're going to be in the main building over there."
The ex-soldier pointed to the biggest building in the compound, a cement block against the huts. "BD, go greet them for us, will you?" Nance asked, and his partner teleported away from them. The two human companions headed towards the building at a brisk pace.
"Man, they are not going to be happy to see a Mexican wrestler,"
Rutger said, shaking his head with amusement. As if on cue, gunshots erupted inside, screaming, permeating the night air through the windows of the main building. They drew their handguns and kicked open the front door, sweeping in simultaneously. Bodies were strewn along the floor, Blue Diablo standing in the middle with two guys in a headlock, 4 more circling him with guns aimed. There was a flurry of movement as the two newcomers approached, everyone frozen in, aiming weapons at everyone else.
"Whoa, whoa,"
Rutger said, firmly.
"Everybody calm down here."
"Rutger?" Ronnie blurted, hair disheveled and eyes blazing. "What the fuck, man? I thought we were cool."
"Ronnie, we're cool, and I'm sorry for the rude introduction to my friends here,"
the ex-soldier said, sincerity lacing his tone.
"But there's some shit going down and we don't have time for all of this."
Ronnie's dark eyes hardened as he chewed his lip, and then he lowered his gun, motioning to his guys to do the same. Blue Diablo let his prisoners go and they scurried behind Ronnie, fear in their gazes.
"All right, man,"
the leader squared his shoulders, running a hand through his shaggy locks.
"I'll give you the benefit of the doubt here. If you thought it necessary to bring a masked Mexican into my compound, there's obviously something going on. So talk." "First off," Rutger said, putting up a finger, "you need to get some guards on that gate, and they need to shoot anyone who comes close to it."
"Jack, David, Bobby, get up there." Ronnie snapped his fingers, and 3 of his guys stood at attention. "You boys have any sort of gas mask?" Nance asked.
"We're prepared for anything," Ronnie replied,
almost sounding offended at the insinuation that he wouldn't have gas masks. "Good," Nance nodded. "Use them, and stay away from any dust coming from them."
"Man, what the hell are you guys into?"
Ronnie cocked his head, raising an eyebrow at Rutger. The ex-soldier and his agent companion shared a glance, and the former nodded his head in understanding.
"It's the government, man," he said, holding up his hands with a shrug. "They dropped something on the town that's making the citizens go crazy. It's highly contagious, which is why you need to shoot on sight." "I fucking knew it, man!" Ronnie cried. "All right, boys, let's show 'em what we can do."
He threw his fist in the air, and his militia sprang to action, scurrying about to grab weapons and equipment. The leader waved the newcomers to a quieter corner out of the way.
"Ronnie, again, I apologize for bursting in on you like that," Rutger said. "This is my friend Nance."
"And that's my friend the Blue Diablo," Nance added, and the wrestler in question simply grunted in greeting.
"If any of us are going to survive this, we're going to need some serious supplies," Rutger continued. "Can you help us out?" "Let me see what I can do," Ronnie replied with a nod. "Follow me."
He led them over to a large metal door and punched a 10-digit code into the keypad to the left of it. The door slid open by itself, and the militia leader proudly led them into a room full of military-grade weaponry.
"Welcome to the shop, boys."
Ronnie spun around to face them, arms spread for effect.
"Jesus Christ!"
Both men breathed in unison, and their host barked a laugh.
"I take it you approve?" he asked.
"Oh, yes," Rutger said with a nod.
"So what do you boys need?"
Ronnie inquired.
"My friend Nance could use a better gun," the ex-soldier said, "and we'll definitely need explosives." "Gonna have to be more specific than that,"
Ronnie grinned toothily.
"You need grenades, C4, fertilizer bomb to take out a city block?"
Rutger scratched the back of his head.
"Ronnie?" "Relax, boys, I'm just fucking with you,"
their host said good-naturedly.
"That bomb will take out a lot more than a city block."
Rutger sighed.
"I think some C4 ought to do us." "Back corner over there," Ronnie directed. "Take as much as you need. Remote detonators are on the shelf beside it."
He leaned on the doorframe, eyeing Blue Diablo, as the other two busied themselves in the corner. "So, what are you thinking?" Nance asked quietly as they loaded up a bag.
"I'm thinking I'm definitely on a government list after making nice with these guys,"
Rutger replied. The agent sighed. "I mean with our current situation."
"Well, I figure we get to the school, set a lie trap for King Leper, and have your teleporting luchador friend plant some C4 on the roof so that if everything goes to shit, we can at least collapse it and trap that son of a bitch until reinforcements show up."
Rutger took a deep breath to replace what he'd lost in his long-winded explanation, and his partner paused. "Not my first choice," Nance shrugged. "But it's as good a plan as we're going to get. Let's load up." They finished packing the bags with explosives and strutted back over to the door. Ronnie held out a modified assault rifle to Nance, who took it with a small smile.
"Here you go,"
their host said.
"Best one I got. Full auto, hollow points, mid-range scope, and got you 5 full clips in addition to the one in there."
"Thanks, Ronnie," Nance said as he checked it over, eyeing the scope. "This will do nicely."
"Glad to help out some patriots in their fight against the tyrannical government,"
Ronnie replied with a grin.
"You boys need anything else?"
"Yeah. You got any thermite?" Rutger piped up.
"Didn't they teach you chemistry in school?" Ronnie chuckled. "It's just aluminum powder, magnesium, and some run-of-the-mill iron oxide. Or rust, if you will."
"Guess I played hooky that day," Rutger admitted.
"We should have the ingredients back at the lab."
Ronnie waved for them to follow him, but as they emerged from the armory, they heard gunshots outside. "That's our cue," Nance said.
"Ronnie, you got a truck we can use?"
Rutger asked, and their host tossed him a set of keys.
"It's the blue one parked right outside," Ronnie said.
"All right. Tell your men to keep firing and to be ready to open that gate in a hurry," Rutger instructed.
"We're going to roll through them and draw them away from here."
Ronnie took the ex-soldier's hand in an arm-wrestling position, and they shook, clasping one another on the back.
"You got it, Rutger," their host said. "You guys stuck your neck out for us, so you survived this, and you and your friend are welcome here any time."
At this, Blue Diablo grunted, and Ronnie rolled his eyes.
Fuck it. Him too.
Chapter 6. "How far away is the school?" Nance asked as he got into the passenger seat, Rutger buckling his seatbelt behind the wheel. There was a thunk as Blue Diablo hopped up into the truck bed behind them.
2, maybe 2.5 miles,
Rutger replied. "If these infected follow us, it's not going to have much time to get set up," the agent mused.
"I'm open to ideas on how to stall them,"
his companion said, raising an eyebrow. Nance reached into the bag of explosives and revealed a small block of C4. He unrolled the window and stuck his head out an arm, addressing his masked friend. "Hey, BD, think you can attach this to one of the infected as we go by?" he asked.
"Does he have to survive the attachment?"
Blue Diablo asked gruffly. "If he does, he won't be alive for very long," Nance shrugged.
"Leave this window open," the luchador replied. "Okay then, I guess we have a plan,"
Rutger nodded, and honked the horn. He unrolled his own window and waved at the militia leader.
"Ronnie, you guys ready?" he asked.
"You're good to go." Ronnie gave him a thumbs up, and then raised his other hand, shooting a bright orange flare into the night sky. This signaled the gatekeepers, and Rutger floored the gas pedal. The tires spun for a moment on the dirt before gaining traction, and the truck leapt forward towards the gate. One gatekeeper pulled open the door just in time, the other laying covering fire. The open door revealed 100 or so infected townspeople, pale skin and bleeding eyes, momentarily frozen from the flare exploding. Their attention turned back to the gate just in time for the front bumper of the big blue truck to make impact. Bodies flew left and right as the truck plowed through, and Blue Diablo wasted no time leaning over, using the open window as a handhold to snatch a zombie. As his hand tightened around a throat, he used the momentum of the speeding truck to flip the infected up onto the roof of the truck, head hanging towards him. The zombie wriggled in his grip, but was no match for the luchador, who shoved the block of C4 right down its throat. When the truck crested the throng, Rutger put 30 yards of distance between them before slowing down, and Blue Diablo tossed the explosive infected into the middle of the road. Nance watched, and as the mass of zombies stepped over their fallen comrade, he detonated it, sending bodies flying everywhere.
"That should buy us some time,"
he declared, as Rutger floored the gas again, speeding towards the school. It didn't take long to get there, and they parked around the side of the building, not wanting their potential getaway to be in the line of fire. As they got out of the vehicle, Nance tossed a block of C4 into the bed of the truck. "Just in case," he said as they started to walk.
"Well, on the off chance we survive this," Rutger replied. "Just remember to take that out before we hit the road."
"One step at a time," Nance said.
"So, how are we going to lure King Leper here?"
the ex-soldier asked. "He knows we're a threat, which is why he sent that army of infected after us at the compound," Nance explained. "So don't worry, he'll show up."
"And if he doesn't?"
Rutger raised an eyebrow. "Fire drill," the agent said somberly.
"How much time we got?"
his companion asked. "Just over an hour," Nance informed him as they busted the lock on the front door. In the lobby they turned to each other.
"I'm going to hit the science lab," Rutger said. "You should probably head to the gym and get the charges set. At least there, if you have to blow the building, you'll have a few seconds before the debris crashes down on top of you."
"Why don't you give Baptiste a call, and BD and I will get the party favors set?" Nance nodded.
"See you on the other side,"
Rutger replied, and then turned to run towards the science lab. It was weird being back in this school after all this time, but he still remembered where everything was. He pressed on his earpiece as he reached the lab door.
"Rutger, I do hope that you come bearing good news."
Baptiste's voice filtered into his ear.
"Well, it's not entirely bad," Rutger said.
"I shall take what I can get,"
came the reply.
"Report."
"I'm headed to the science lab at the high school, and Nance and the masked luchador are planting C4 charges on the ceiling of the gym," Rutger explained. "Worst case, we are going to make a last stand here and trap the king so your boys can dispose of him properly."
He rummaged through the chemical storage room, looking for anything they could use.
"They will be there within the hour, but if you are unable to break his spell over the infected, I fear the damage will be catastrophic,"
Baptiste said.
"We've already had a report of a night security guard being attacked at a high-rise office building, and there is currently a standoff."
"God damn it," Rutger cursed. "Am I really asking for too much today?"
"I take it they don't have lye?"
Baptiste asked.
"Or acid, or much of fucking anything," the ex-soldier grunted.
"Read off to me what you have at your disposal, and let's see if we can't come up with a viable alternative,"
the voice in the earpiece suggested.
"Okay, I've got sodium, lithium, aluminum powder, magnesium."
Rutger trailed off, a niggling thought in the back of his brain.
"Rutger?"
Baptiste prompted.
"Are you okay?"
"I just need to find some rust and I can make that thermite," he remembered. "I just need to know how to combine and detonate it."
"I can walk you through it,"
Baptiste confirmed, and before he could reply, the sound of machine gun fire echoed through the building.
"Give me the nickel version," Rutger urged.
"Okay, you need to do a 27 to 80 ratio mixture of—"
"I said nickel."
"Fine."
Baptiste sighed.
"Do a 3-to-1 mixture of the aluminum powder and rust, and use a magnesium strip as a fuse. Light it and stand back."
"There you go,"
Rutger appraised, and grabbed the ingredients he needed. He turned and kicked a rusted old shelf, smashing at it with his boot until it shattered. He dumped the aluminum powder into the pile and then took off out of the lab as more gunfire sounded. Nance stood in the gymnasium doors, popping off rounds into infected townsfolk as they entered into the school lobby.
"How you doing, Blue?" he called over his shoulder.
"One more,"
Blue Diablo replied, teleporting to the last rafter to set the final charge.
"Good, because I'm going to need help down here,"
Nance cried as he unloaded the final clip into a pack of zombies tearing into the school. He dropped the now useless weapon and drew his handgun and a detonator. Infected townsfolk poured into the building like a tsunami, and he hit the detonator on Channel 1, blowing up the truck outside. Body parts fly into the school lobby, but Nance slammed the door shut before he could see any more, blocking out the group still rushing towards him. The far door of the gym burst open, revealing another slew of infected villagers, and they tore across the basketball court to get to him. Blue Diablo dropped out of the rafters and landed in center court, laying haymakers all around like a tag team partner on a hot tag. Bodies fell but didn't burst into dust, and Nance started to lose his footing against the door.
"I can't hold them,"
he cried, and the luchador swiveled to look him in the eye.
"Hide,"
he said firmly, and his partner let go of the door, sprinting beneath the bleachers. As he reached the tangled mass of metal bars, he fired back over his shoulder once, catching one of the townsfolk in the arm. He dove through the bars, dodging and chopping around beneath the bleachers to avoid getting hit. His movement was limited, but so was theirs. He hoped his new friend was faring better. Rutger skidded around the corner towards the lobby, stopping short at the sight of infected swarming down the hallway towards the gym. He dropped into a crouch and fired, unloading a clip at knee height to try to penetrate deep into the throng. This disabled some, but drew the attention of a lot more, and they started to march towards him before stopping short. Rutger stood up straight, adrenaline pumping as the front doors to the school opened. In strolled King Leper himself, and the ex-soldier grinned wildly.
"Hey, King Douche," he said triumphantly. "Come and get me."
The king snapped his fingers, and 6 infected barreled past him to give chase, the High Leper himself strolling casually behind.
"Rip him apart," he said.
Rutger ducked back around the corner towards the science lab, leaving the door open behind him. As soon as the zombies tumbled in, they were met with a volley of bullets exploding into dust. 3 more entered through the cloud, and the loud click of Rutger's empty gun caused them to scream in amusement. He tossed the empty gun at the middle attacker, causing just enough of a distraction for him to draw his sword. He slid by, slicing right through the zombie's waist, the top half of it flopping over as it went poof. The one to the left leapt at him, throwing a punch, but its fist met sword, the arm like a sheath as Rutger slid it in until the hilt hit knuckles. The other tried to get at him from the back, but he reeled his leg in a fierce roundhouse kick to the face. He grasped the infected's hair and brought its throat down on his knee twice, and then caught it in a chokehold when the first one swung with its sword fist. Rutger managed to dodge the blow, grabbing the handle as he snapped the neck of the infected in his arm. He spun around in a slicing arc, taking off the zombie's head. The dust settled, revealing King Leper standing in the doorway.
"Well, it's about time your Royal Highness showed up,"
Rutger said, leaning on his sword casually.
"Why are you sending all these town folks out to do your dirty work?"
"They are beneath me,"
King Leper rasped in that chalky, dead voice.
"Just as you are beneath me."
"Royalty, modest, and man that complexion," Rutger grinned. "You must be a hit with the ladies."
The demon threw off his shawl, revealing a grotesque body of rotting flesh. Lesions and boils littered his skin, cracked and flaking with crusted pus. The scent of death and decay hit Rutger in the face like a freight train, and he turned to heave, his stomach trying to expel what little was inside of it. At that moment, King Leper lunged forward, catching him in the chest with his rotten fist. Rutger flew backwards, a desk crunching beneath him, sword skittering away across the floor. He got up slowly, just in time to see the pestilence-riddled fist coming at his face, and he dodged, catching the king at the wrist. Rutger flung his body back with all his might, pulling his enemy to the ground with him, and putting a knee in his back, wrenching the arm back. Normally this would break an arm or pop a shoulder, but the ex-soldier was surprised when the arm just came right off of the body.
King Leper used the shock to slither out from beneath his foe, jumping up into a fighting stance. Rutger raised the arm like a baseball bat and smashed him across the face with it. It was a sufficient weapon to beat the owner of the arm with, and after a quick and brutal beatdown, he finally managed to smack the king in the back of the head, knocking him to the floor. Rutger stepped on the other shoulder and broke off the other arm, swinging his prizes around as he strolled over to his sword. His enemy screamed in anger and frustration, managing to stumble to his feet and stagger to the door.
"Nuh-uh. Where do you think you're going?"
Rutger asked, and flung one of the limbs towards its master, catching the king in the back of the knee. The demon tumbled to the ground in a heap, and the sound of shrieks echoed down the hallway. Rutger stepped over the now armless demon and peeked out the door, seeing another pack of infected running towards him.
"You just don't quit, do you?"
he sighed.
"I have legions of followers who will never stop pursuing you,"
King Leper said with a sneer.
"There is nothing you can do."
Rutger shut the door and clicked the deadbolt.
"Well, you say that,"
he said, as the throng banged on the locked door.
"Well, I'm sure they would eventually get in here. They aren't going to have the time."
He brought his sword down on the king's ankles, severing his feet in one fell swoop.
"You wait here, Stumpy."
He crossed to the pile of rust and aluminum, scooping up a hefty amount of it in an empty glass jar. He grabbed the magnesium strip and returned to the king, who was trying to get up on his stumps to reach the door. Rutger grabbed his shirt collar and pushed him down onto his back.
"You know, if you weren't such a scum-sucking demon from hell, I might actually give you some props for your effort," he grinned. "But given how you wiped out my entire town with your plague dandruff, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction."
Talk, talk, talk,"
King Leper rasped, rolling his crusty eyes.
"That's all you can do to me, boy. You don't have anything that can kill me."
"Well, you say that," Rutger repeated, and held up the jar. The demon squinted at it, and his pox-riddled brows furrowed in concern, just as the ex-soldier plunged his sword into his chest. He dragged the blade down and then stabbed again, dragging it back across to make a deep X in King Leper's torso. He swirled the sword around in a circle as if he were churning butter inside the demon's chest cavity, and then admired the hole he'd created as he lifted the jar again.
"Now, see, this here is what we call thermite,"
Rutger explained, as he nestled the jar into the putrid-smelling crater.
"I didn't have the best education, oddly enough, in this very classroom, so I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen when I set this thing off."
He inserted the magnesium fuse and pulled a Zippo lighter out of his back pocket.
"All I know is that I'm going to be on the other side of the room when it happens."
The demon muttered unintelligible words that sounded like they could be curses in another language as Rutger lit the strip's end. He flicked the Zippo closed, and at the click, King Leper started to squirm as violently as he could.
"You can call me the doctor."
Rutger raised his hands as he backed up into the far corner of the room.
"Because I just cured this whole motherfucking town."
Magnesium hit powder, and the thermite ignited, casting a bright red glow across the room. Rutger watched, wide-eyed, as the demon melted down into a puddle of bulbous goo, smoke curling off of him instead of skin flakes. His rasping curses dissipated, only the fizzle of the metal-melting concoction echoing as what was left of King Leper melted away. Rutger touched his earpiece, waiting for the telltale click of someone on the other end.
"Yo, Baptiste," he said jovially. "The king has been usurped. You can call off the fire drill."
Was the thermite successful?
Came the voice on the other end.
"He's currently a puddle of flaming goo on the floor,"
Rutger replied, waving his hand in front of his face to try to waft away the smell.
"And the infected?"
Baptiste asked.
"Well, they stopped banging on the door, so I'm going to assume that's a good sign."
Rutger shrugged.
"If they've stopped attacking, then his control has been broken."
The attaché acknowledged.
"You're going to keep your word now, right?"
the ex-soldier asked, a note of warning in his tone.
"Yes, Rutger. I'm dispatching transport trucks to your location now,"
Baptiste said.
"Thank you,"
Rutger replied, shoulders slumping with relief at the sincerity in the man's voice.
It's my pleasure,
Baptiste replied.
I was wondering if I could ask one more thing of you.
Rutger scoffed. Haven't I done enough today?
You most certainly have, sir,
Baptiste said quickly.
And if you decline my request, I will certainly understand.
Okay, the ex-soldier sighed. Shoot.
Would you please accompany Nance back to our storage facility?
Baptiste asked.
I would like to speak to you in person.
Oh shit, Nance, Rutger cried, heart skipping a beat.
Rutger?
Yeah, oh fuck, he cursed, and readied his sword, striding to the lab door. I just remembered that Nance and that Blue Diablo guy were facing off against a couple hundred of those infected. I need to go check on them.
And my request?
Baptiste asked hopefully. I'll see you in a few hours, Rutger promised.
Very good,
came the reply, and then click. Rutger took a deep breath and unlocked the deadbolt, inching the door open to peek out. At the sight of confused and weak-looking townsfolk strewn about, he rushed into the hallway. What is going on? One man groaned, hissing at the pain of trying to stand up. It's hard to explain, Rutger replied gently, putting a placating hand up. Just trust me. Stay here and don't move. Everything is going to be okay. He strode past them, sheathing his sword so as not to startle anyone, and rounded the corner to head towards the gymnasium. The hallway was lined with dozens of sick people, leaning on each other and moaning, some crying. A few were staggering about, calling for their loved ones, not knowing how they'd gotten there. Folks, I'm Rutger, the ex-soldier called loudly as he walked through the crowd. Most of you know me, and, well, most of you don't like me. Be that as it may, some serious shit went down in this town and you were all affected. Actually, infected. You were all very, very sick. He was halfway down the hallway, and the murmurs amongst the townspeople rose into more agitated concern. Everyone please calm down. Help is on the way. I just need everyone to remain calm and stay where they are. Why? A woman shrieked from behind him. What's happening? A man on the floor tried to grab at Rutger's leg on the way by. Why aren't you sick like us? Another man asked, voice wavering with fear and confusion. Everyone! Rutger reached the gym doors and turned around, putting his hands up again to stop the rabble. Please, I will explain everything shortly. He ducked into the gym, eyes nearly popping out of his head at the massive body squirming in pain. They'd clearly been littered about by the luchador standing tall in the center of the mayhem. Holy hell, Blue, Rutger said, bewildered. This place looks like a bomb went off at the Royal Rumble. I'm good at what I do, Blue Diablo replied proudly, arms crossed over his considerable chest. Nance, Rutger called, head swiveling around. You still with us? The agent climbed out from under the bleachers, raising his hand. Yeah, I'm here, he greeted. Going to need some help over here, though. Got some injured people trapped beneath the bleachers. They approached each other, and Rutger nodded, not wanting to verbally admit how happy he was to see his new friend alive. So I'm guessing you were able to get him dissolving in some lye? Nance inquired. Thermite, actually, Rutger replied. He's a puddle of goo, and won't be a threat to anyone anymore. Rutger, you've done a hell of a job here. The agent scratched the back of his head. I'd hate to think where we'd be without you. At the very least, Baptiste would have burned this city to the ground. His eyes widened. Oh fuck, I've got to call that off. Relax, I called him as the king was going up in flames, Rutger said. Nance smiled. I'm sure he appreciated the news. I assume so, the ex-soldier said with a shrug. He wants me to accompany you back to the storage facility, whatever the hell that is. Says he wants to talk to me in person. Alrighty then, Nance replied, nodding. As soon as the cleanup crew gets here, we'll see about hijacking a chopper and heading in. Sounds like a plan, especially since you blew up Ronnie's truck. Rutger grinned. Think he'll be upset about that? Nance raised an eyebrow. Nah, Rutger waved him off. Knowing those boys, they're probably already, acquiring some new transportation from some of the unguarded homes in the area. Nance chuckled. Yeah, you're totally on a government list now. Epilogue. The storage facility looked like somebody had turned a distribution warehouse into a military-grade bunker. As the helicopter lowered onto the landing pad, Rutger noticed a dark-skinned man in a pristine white lab coat approaching from one of the bay doors. He held a clipboard and a pen, looking ever the part of secret agency scientist. As he and Nance dismounted the helicopter, the blades slowed and they approached the young attaché on the walkway. "Nance, Rutger," Baptiste greeted them, shaking each hand in turn. "Glad you survived this ordeal relatively unscathed." "Yeah, me too," Nance replied, running a hand through his hair. "Been a hell of a few days." "I can imagine, Nance," Baptiste agreed. "Why don't you go get some rest before writing up your report? I'd like to discuss some things with Rutger." Nance nodded and turned to his new friend, extending his hand. "It's been a pleasure," he said, eyes tired but sincere. "Hope to work with you again."
"If it does come to that," Rutger replied and shook the agent's hand. "Hopefully it will be on a project that's a little less funky."
Nance barked a laugh. "Probably not in this line of work." He shot Baptiste a little salute and strode into the building. The attaché opened his mouth, but Rutger put up his hand to stop him from speaking.
"Okay, Baptiste," he said firmly. "Before you give me your pitch or whatever you wanted to talk to me about, I want to know what's going to happen to the sick people in my town."
"Fair enough," came the reply. "Please follow me." He started down the walkway, leading the X-Delta into the facility, where a golf cart waited for them. He got into the driver's seat and shot Rutger an expectant look. His companion reluctantly got into the passenger seat, looking around the concrete hallway.
"This facility is 600,000 square feet with multiple levels of security,"
Baptiste began as he pushed the gas, propelling them into a massive room full of steel boxes.
"There are resident quarters, training facilities, a vault for various demon artifacts, and one for the most advanced laboratories in the world. Deep in the heart of this facility is our storage unit, where we keep the most dangerous demons we come across, but have no way of disposing of. For most of them, we put them into a deep freeze, which not only keeps them contained, but gives our scientists the ability to draw blood and tissue samples for testing." "So you can figure out how to kill the unkillable?" Rutger inquired.
"Precisely," Baptiste nodded, turning a corner down another hallway. "And seeing as how this is a relatively new facility, we have plenty of storage space here. According to the latest information I have, 237 people from your town survived the encounter with King Leper. However, they only have about 48 hours to live. We will put them on ice here and use every resource at our disposal to attempt to find a cure."
"How confident are you that you can find a cure?"
Rutger asked, and pursed his lips. "I won't lie to you, Rutger. Our hopes aren't high." Baptiste shook his head as he parked the cart, stepping off to lead his guest to a white railing. "More than likely, these people will either remain frozen forever, or will have a weekend to live out the rest of their lives. But I gave you my word I would do everything I could for them, and I will." He inclined his head, and Rutger approached the railing, looking down at the room below. Men in white coats loaded up frozen glass caskets, each with an infected townsperson inside.
"That's all I ask,"
Rutger said, and took a deep breath, letting it out with a whoosh. "Thank you for your understanding." Baptiste bowed his head a little in appreciation.
"Okay, now that we have that business out of the way,"
Rutger turned and leaned on the railing, crossing his arms.
"Go ahead and ask me what you want to ask me."
"Very well." The attaché stood up straighter, clasping his hands over the clipboard in front of him. "As you have no doubt seen, there are some evil things out there that need dealing with. You have shown yourself to be quite capable in a fight and are quick on your feet. While you are older than our typical recruit, you have shown the rare ability to complete high-risk missions. If you are interested, I'd like to bring you on as a special operations agent."
"Does it pay well?"
Rutger asked. "Hardly," Baptiste replied, shaking his head. "But you get your own room here at the facility, access to some otherworldly weapons, and the cafeteria isn't half bad." Rutger pursed his lips in thought for a beat, and then shrugged.
"I'm in."
The end.